Hey everybody, welcome back.
Positivity! Let's do it! Yay! Sunshines and rainbows! Yeah, it was a little tricky to try and stay positive this year, but eventually we were actually able to gather up a handful of movies to put as the best of this year, and at least from my list, I can definitely say that I enjoyed watching these movies, and I would definitely enjoy watching them in the future. And these did actually show a still handful of talent and creativity, and even creativity in a pre-existing subject matter as well as medium that you can actually still pull out ingenious and actually interesting scenarios from pre-existing material. So, to dig our way out of the shit, we got the golden nuggets that are at the bottom of the shit pile.
Well, I mean, for me, these movies, if you look at the best of any year, it'll seem like any year is the best year ever. Because, I mean, that's why they're the best, you know? My movies aren't just good because they came out this year. They're good movies any year. They're movies that I thoroughly would enjoy watching years from now or years before. So, that's just my way of thinking.
Fuck it, let's get down to it. We are counting down the top 5, damn it. The top 5 best movies of 2018.
I'm just trying to raise your love. The Jesus of Suburbia, the Bible love. None of the above. Only steady, tired.
And since we started with Chris on our worst of the year lists, I feel like being a generous man, and I'm gonna step up to the plate first because my number 5 choice for best of this year is Sorry to Bother You. Yeah, it did sound like I originally trashed this movie a bit when I first saw it and when we first reviewed it back in the summer.
You straight up told me, it's nothing to write home about. You could probably skip it.
I don't remember saying that you could skip it because I did really enjoy this movie. This movie was very funny at points, and it did have these sparks of genuine creativity and genuine humor, and also being able to take a genuine story matter and actually breathe life into something that's original. I did very much enjoy the character of Cassius Green and even the performance behind him with Lakeith Stanfield, who is very likable, and I personally thought he did the right thing a little too much, and I thought he should have gone with a different route story-wise, but then again, that's down to the story. When you look at the characters, they are still lively, they are still fun, and you do want to try and follow them on this adventure that they try and go through when it's supposed to be daily life, even though it's like an alternate dimension of some kind. But yeah, the direction is very visually pleasing for comedy's sake as well. And, well, comedy's sake alone, it's funny. It is funny, and the jokes that they actually do come up with do hit bullseyes. And and even with the commentary bits, which in doses and actual, like with pacing, they are smartly created and well executed. And also, it just gave us the best line of the year. You want to be a horse, don't you? You'll have a horse cock. But yeah, it can be crazy when you put it down to the expansion of that premise. It is creative, it is insightful, and it is even uplifting sometimes when you do try and put characters into perspective. But regardless, even though I did think it was going a different direction, I enjoyed what I had, and for me, it was definitely one of the best, if not the best, comedy of the year.
Okay. Well, my number 5 is Mary and the Witch's Flower. I know a lot of people probably look at that poster and they think, holy shit, Studio Ghibli made another movie? How did I miss that? Well, not quite. This is brought to us by Studio Panak, a new-ish type studio founded by many former animators of Studio Ghibli, hence to why their styles are not just similar, but exactly the same. I'm pretty sure you show a few frames of this to anybody, they'd swear up and down that this had to be Studio Ghibli, but it's not. And honestly, that's quite impressive. And the similarities don't just stop there. While this movie is based on a book called The Little Broomstick, it plays like a weird combination of Castle in the Sky, Kiki's Delivery Service, Spirited Away, as well as some other inspirations like the Harry Potter series and Coraline of all things. So, I can't call it the most original movie I saw this year, but what it is the one of the most delightful movies I saw this year. I am not ashamed to admit I had the biggest, dopiest grin on my face while watching this. It takes me right back to my childhood while watching the classic fantasy Studio Ghibli movies. I mean, Mary herself is a very, very likable protagonist. I mean, very similar to Coraline, she doesn't start off the most endearing, but you quickly warm up to her, and then by the end, you really see how far she's come. And while I did just mention a list of inspirations this movie wears proudly on its sleeves, and I may condemn other movies for doing similar things, the big difference here is that it doesn't ever feel like a cheap knockoff. It doesn't feel like they're just cashing in on more popular franchises or it due to a lack of originality or creativity. You can feel the passion through the screen. You can tell that there was effort put into this and they really wanted to make this work. And in my opinion, they did. So regardless of my nostalgia for the Ghibli films, I do think Mary and the Witch's Flower has enough quality to stand on its own. And at the time of making this video, I believe it's still on Netflix. So with that, you don't really have much of an excuse. Just give it a watch.
Everyone stream away. It's only 90 minutes?
It's about 90 minutes, yeah.
That's not that much of your time. I might see it too. Who knows? And it's anime. It's gonna catch your heart, but with you saying it has likable characters, I can definitely take your word for it that it's gonna be good. Which is the exact opposite of what you're gonna say about my number 4 pick, which is Ready Player One. I couldn't help myself. I just had too much fun with this movie. And yes, you did say how it is very hard to have fun with a movie when you can't believe the scenarios that are coming up with it and, well, a lot of other stuff that comes up with it as well. But I just saw it as, like, I just saw the outline as like a bare minimum of something you can take in, but also just everything visual and everything that just happens in this movie is so big, and I'm still captivated by the size, scope, and just the all-around world and atmosphere that this does provide. And yes, there are fundamental flaws in this. So some of the story elements don't work. And yeah, some of the character aspects and the character arcs don't necessarily translate over very well. But luckily, I did hear this was actually transcribed or translated better from the book to the movie. Although this did rely on a lot of pop cultural icons and references, but again, like you said during your explanation of your last movie, I had the biggest grin on my face. I was the happiest fucking camper I could have ever been while watching this. I felt like I was a kid. This was one of the most fun movies that I saw this year. And yes,
sorry, I'm allergic to stupidity.
Fuck off. But yeah, I still could not help but have experienced joy through this. Just the idea of these video games being a release from the real world, which is a very accurate representation of what video games represent nowadays, as well as a staple for time as well. Yes, it can be corny, but at least it wasn't annoying for me. The romance story I liked. I was suckered into it. I liked the lead character enough where he wasn't just bland and generic and boring. He did have signs of life in him,
Can I just say what I thought was funny?
Yeah.
He looked more badass in his real life counterpart than in his in-game counterpart.
Well, that might be a compliment. That might still be a compliment at that point.
The same thing goes for the girl too, who was apparently so scared for her little birthmark.
When they put the hair over it constantly, and they have her in the. They barely even show it. But who cares? It's a character trope or trait, whatever you want to go with. When you're going along for this amusement park of a ride through a movie, this is one of the first movies that first movies in a very long time that I saw back to back days wise. I saw it with you and the boys, which you can check out that video, our first 4-person video ever. I saw it with my cousin the very next day. I liked it just as much, if not better, because I was able to remember when the stupid parts were and just sort of, well, phase them out, I guess. But yeah, just witnessing all this spectacle and, well, again, this fun nature. It's just a simple story with the ability to try and be able to, well, go to a different demographic. Yeah, some of the dialogue is a little corny, but when you're actually displaying everything in this big realm of a world, it's hard for me not to get suckered in. This was probably the best guilty pleasure of the year for me. Period.
Okay. Yeah, I don't knock anyone for liking it. I just hope you understand why I don't like it.
Oh, and I definitely do.
Okay.
Just go backwards!
5 years!
Go backwards!
5 years! Oh my god. Okay. So, my number 4, a movie you've never heard of, likely, Mandy.
Wow, yeah. Well, the first thing I think of when I hear just that name or the title of that movie is, well, possibly another music biography, Barry Manilow!
Nope. So, this is definitely one of those, the less said about this movie, the better. Mm-hmm. So, if anyone out there already knows anything about this movie, you don't need me to recommend it to you why you really need to see this movie. So, let me just sell it to you all with a pitch. Nicolas Cage is back, and he's pissed because his girlfriend Mandy kinda died thanks to this sick fuck religious cult Christian band. So now a Christian band. So now armed to the teeth with a crossbow and a combat scythe, he's ready to take his revenge. But first, he has to take out their super-powered death squad, which are basically like the Xenobites from Hellraiser if they were a biker gang. Tell me!
And I just saw Hellraiser recently.
Tell me you don't want to see a movie like that.
Oh my god, why aren't we watching that right now?
I have it on Blu-ray actually back there.
Oh, perfect, yes.
So,
okay.
This might actually be the first year where I own every movie on my list on Blu-ray.
Very good, very good.
Well, so... I may think I gave away a little too much in that pitch, but trust me, I didn't. The fact that Mandy dies is pretty upfront in this movie's advertising, which brings me to one of the more polarizing features of this movie, the first half being focusing on Mandy and ultimately leading to her death. A lot of people call it slow and boring and a bunch of meandering. You know, the kind of comments you probably hear from your review, from a review of Blade Runner 2049, because God forbid a movie demand your attention for longer than a minute. Yes, the first half is slow, but it's a slow burn. It's not meant to be immediately satisfying. It is actually quite uncomfortable. They make you sit there and watch what they do to this poor woman, and in turn make you they set up what irredeemable bastards the villains are and give some level of intimidation. Remember when villains used to be intimidating? I do, and I miss it. Basically what I'm saying is that Nicolas Cage's revenge rampage wouldn't be nearly as satisfying without that intense buildup. And when it finally does happen, holy hell, is it unapologetically gruesome. It's metal as fuck.
Yeah.
And it's just a bunch of Nick Cage being awesome. And if you're still not sold on this movie, let me just leave you with one of the best parts, or one of my favorite parts. At some point, Nicolas Cage is captured by the, let's just call them the Xenobikers.
That's fucking perfect, Xenobikers.
He's tied up, and one of them comes in with a knife and slashes him right across his chest. And his only reaction to this was, "That was my favorite shirt." And the payoff to this is later when he escapes, he finds that same guy, and as he's killing him, he's like screaming, "You ripped my shirt! You ripped my shirt!" Seriously, go see this movie.
That might. Well, if I would have seen that this year, I probably would just put that at number one by proxy. What the? Okay, I definitely need to see that, especially because we don't have enough Nick Cage anymore. We need more. We need more Nick Cage.
We need more of the good Nick Cage, not the boring kind.
Not Left Behind Nick Cage.
Well, or even the like National Treasure Nick Cage, which I mean, is not bad movies, and he's not bad in that movie. But it's like I want more of the fun Nick Cage.
Yes, the coked up Nick Cage, just without the coke.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, these guys were probably on at least something in order to be able to get the muscles, the roidiness, the testosterone manness. Because my number 3 pick is Creed 2. Yeah, and well, with the Rocky franchise, I am gonna enjoy anything they produce because the Rocky movies are my movies. Like I've seen all of them multiple times. I even enjoy the stupid ones, the Rocky 4, and I actually rewatched Rocky 3 recently. You can actually take that seriously as opposed to that, but luckily one of the good things about Creed 2 is that, like with the first one, you're able to take this one seriously, and it does go it has to go the sequel route when it comes to the first Creed. Did you see the first Creed?
I did. I actually really liked it.
Oh, love the first Creed, even though it can be similar to the first one, but it does bring new life and new elements into it, and that's sort of what this one does. It's a combination of Rocky 2, Rocky 3, and Rocky 4 all mixed into one because it's Creed. He just wins the world belt, but then he's immediately challenged by Drago's son. And Drago's dad, Drago, killed Creed's dad in the ring in Rocky 4. And Rocky tries to reel him back. It has the Rocky 2 element because, he wins the belt, but it's also how much longer can you go on with this? Will your body be physically able to take it with you starting a family? It's Rocky 3 because it's the redemption tale. He gets the shit kicked out of him early on, but then he finds a way to bounce back, rise back, and find the heart, find the fight. And then it's Rocky 4 just because, it's Russia, we're against them, it's personal now. But, it doesn't seem like that good when you put it into that synopsis right away, but what makes it work is that they do continue on with the story within the characters. They do develop Creed into the idea of being a family man and being able to take on other responsibilities on top of his drive to be successful and to try and own up to his family name. And also, even the redemption is a little bit better because he did roll in on a high horse during the first Creed. And seeing anybody try and face a reality is always going to be interesting. And trying to see how they can find a way, just a way to be able to lift themselves up. And the direction in this is a little bit quick. They do rush through some of the more important elements, like they sort of rush through the training montage near the end. But that's because they put so much focus on the aftermath and and sort of the real life and important aspects of it. And even though Rocky himself, Sylvester Stallone, wasn't as much as like a staple in this, that does leave way for Michael B. Jordan to be as good as he is in this. The acting is good. The direction is good when necessary because it's not made from the same guy who made the first Creed. But luckily, he still understood what made the first one so good, and luckily they still ride the wave on that. And I was chanting in this. This got me hyped. It's a good ride, it's a good movie, and it's good sports action, and it's still just overall fulfilling.
That's good.
Looking forward to watching it, or just wait for it to be rented or watched on TV?
Well, most of the movies I watch nowadays are from like renting it offline, Apple TV, stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So as soon as it gets on there, and I get a chance, I'll probably watch it.
Worth renting.
Okay. I don't buy movies before I've seen them.
That is a very good idea.
Yeah, so My number 3 is Isle of Dogs. Now, this movie is a bunch of movies I've been wanting for a long time, all rolled together in one convenient package. It's an animated movie that's different and doesn't suck and actually respects its audience. It's a stop-motion animated movie. It's a Wes Anderson movie. It's a Wes Anderson stop-motion animated movie. Yes, please. I'm convinced this movie did not start its life as a Wes Anderson movie, but it is anything other than just a dopey-ass kids movie where a bunch of dogs are put on an island because the governor's a cat person. And then Wes Anderson comes along and he's like, I wonder what you could do with this.
Wonder how we can make this more charming. And
the result is something that is both equal part comedic and surprisingly bleak. And that's good for me because comedies rarely ever work without some element to get me to care. I know for you that's not usually the case, but whatever. I will say the plot and tone is very unorthodox, but it works tremendously well, and I love it. And there's something else that has to be said, too, about this movie's dedication to its setting. Because, it takes place in future Japan, and for most movies that would just be window dressing, but not here. Everything, absolutely everything, is ingrained into the culture, into the location. And I mean, hell, subtitles are kept to a minimum, where most of the translation is diegetic or, contextualized in some way. That's something you only ever see from directors that are at the top of their game, and I don't expect really anything less from Wes Anderson. I really do think the guy has a lot of talent, and I mean, honestly,
and almost the entire film industry has seen that as well. There is a reason that he has a fan base. There's a reason that he literally has his own. Tropes, but his own style, his own specific taste and visuals.
Yeah.
There's a reason why he is Wes Anderson.
Yep. This movie may not sound like a whole lot on paper, and I understand its weirdness is probably going to be what's off-putting to a lot of people. So I'm just going to say that it is one of the most unique and interesting movies I saw this year, and at this point, I think if you should know by now whether Wes Anderson movies would strike a chord with you or not, but if you haven't seen any of them, this is a good place to start, honestly.
It is a very good place to start. You could also start off with Fantastic Mr. Fox or Moonrise Kingdom, or possibly, I'm not 100% sure, maybe Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Or the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Grand Budapest that might be a little bit too bleak or dark before you try and see. Anyway, but back to Isle of Dogs. I absolutely enjoyed that movie this year as well. It was a fresh take. It was original. It was, again, a new style, something we hadn't seen in a long... I don't know when was the last time we actually legitimately saw a stop-motion movie. The Lego movie doesn't count.
Well, part stop motion, but not full stop motion.
Exactly. But, yeah, it was still... it was interesting to look at. It was interesting to, go along with this story, even as ridiculous as it is. And just so many details in Wes Anderson movies that you can't even... that's just what makes it so interesting to watch and so interesting to look at. And I might actually... watch that. Well, I probably will see that movie with you in the future.
Again, I got it on Blu-ray. It is a double feature with that and Fantastic Mr. Fox. I had to buy that.
Oh, perfect. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely liked it. Not as much as you did, and I'll get into a little bit more why later. But yeah, moving on. It's a complete opposite of an animated movie, but also with a little bit of elements to it. My number 2 is A Quiet Place. And, it does have the elements of animation because it primarily focuses on visuals. But that's not necessarily what makes this movie stand out. What makes this movie stand out is that it is primarily a film lover's film. In that it goes back to the original roots and details of what makes a movie great. Goes into the writing of it, the story elements, what you can show visually, and what you can actually display with a film camera and editing, and and also auditory stuff. Everything auditory with this movie is amazing, even though it's supposed to be a quiet place. The music behind it, and again, music can be such a good thing, and it does show through with this movie as well. And just the idea of sound, and so many. Well, think about the Wes Anderson details, but up the creative ante of this to about 1,000, and that's what you get with this. You get a simple story about this simple concept, even though it's one of the most drastic and dark concepts I don't know ever thought of, period, but it's still like mesmerizing in how haunting it can be. You cannot physically make a sound or you will die. And just all the details that go into how the world works and how they need to adjust to their new daily life just to survive. And what you feel, and this also shows how you can feel the weight of scenarios and the weight of characters without even needing to express dialogue. Like he put in for me at the end of our Quiet Place video, one of the most romantic scenes from this entire year was done through music and just through a little bit of dancing with another story element thrown in. John Krasinski dancing with his pregnant wife, listening to music on an iPod. That's all you need in order to be able to share that, to show that people care about each other and to move along a story and character traits. And it also showed even how simple of a movie can be, how effective it can be. Just everything surrounding this is captivating. John Krasinski gets a huge up for me for being director of this and being at the creative helm for it, and just going along with authenticity to it. This movie does not feel like bullshit at all, and it scares you. It makes you feel it makes you feel triumphant by the end. Well, depending on your take of it, which again, open-ending discussion can last for days on end. But yeah, that's why I loved it, and that's why it's on the list.
Okay. My number 2 is Annihilation, which was the first new movie I saw of this year, and that should speak volumes to how it's managed to stay lodged in my brain like a bullet. Now, just like Mandy, I can't give away too much about this movie without ruining it, so I'm just going to say that if you have even a passing interest in science fiction, this is definitely one you want to see as soon as you can.
Well, and also we produced a video on it beforehand, so you can get a lot of other points from that.
To everyone else, the movie is about an anomaly known as the Shimmer, which is like a giant wall of melting glass surrounding an area and is growing bigger day after day. What is it? Why is it? How is it? Don't know. And that's the fun of this movie, is seeing this mystery slowly unfold in front of you. They've sent in drones, they've sent in animals, they've sent in soldiers, and nobody's ever come back. So now it's time to send in the scientists to see if they can make sense of all of this. And what we get is a journey that is equal parts beautiful and terrifying. And I mean, I'm talking like horror movie levels of terrifying. It's definitely the kind of movie that's going to prey on first-time viewers, but in turn that's going to demand multiple viewings. And I do like that. I like movies with some rewatchability to them. Alex Garland definitely has a very keen eye for this kind of stuff, and he lays out a foundation enough to where everything makes sense, but leaves just enough open for you to think, to theorize, to maybe draw some of your own conclusions to it. I really love when science fiction movies do that. When I showed this to my dad the first time, he noticed one detail that I completely missed that kind of flips the whole movie on its head. And that's on top of having a holy shit, what the fuck kind of ending. So, yeah, it seems like every year we get at least one really, really good science fiction movie, one that captures the true essence of what drew me to the genre in the first place, whether it's Ex Machina, Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, and now we have Annihilation to add to that list. And for the longest time this year, I swore this was going to be my number 1 choice. But if it weren't for a certain other movie that just barely inched ahead of it.
Get my television fix. Sitting on my crucifix.
With that said, let's get on to honorable mentions of this year. Just stuff that wasn't able to quite crack the ceiling, but still stayed in our minds. And one of them for me is Overlord. So yeah, I enjoyed that movie. You hated it. But again, simple, gore fest, fun movie. Shoot some guns around, shoot some zombies, talk about trying to develop when you only develop a little bit. It was simple enough for me. I thought it was fine. Far from the best, but fun.
You know, I had one. Might as well be one part where he's like, "Yeah, I was talking with this weirdo named Martin Luther King. He talked about trying to free blacks from America. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. There's no racism here."
So you wanted more racism in a World War II movie?
I wanted a realistic portrayal of a World War II movie. How about that?
All right. We may never get it. Hold your breath.
We already have. What are you talking about?
I haven't seen...
There are plenty of great World War II movies out there.
I haven't... Well, the only one... Well, one of the primary ones I know of is The Great Escape. I haven't seen enough of them. You could probably... Why don't you be my captain on that voyage of World War II movies?
Well, there's too many to name at the moment. I'm just saying, like... Overlord, I know, is just supposed to be a schlock fest, but it doesn't work because it gets in the way of the horror aspect. It gets in the way of the war aspect. It just doesn't. Like
you think it tries too hard?
No, it doesn't try hard enough in many attributes. I think that's my biggest problem. So, you know, not the worst, not the best, just
Jinx. Anyway,
well, an honorable mention for me is Alpha. It's a simple story of a boy and his wolf buddy trying to survive a journey home, but shot in the most gorgeous, the most beautiful, most grand and epic. I really wish I saw this movie in theaters, but I didn't. Either way, I'm glad I saw it at all, and I think more people should as well.
Alpha. Wait, how many more single name titles can we get this year?
I got another one. Upgrade. Saw the trailer for this movie, and I thought, it just looks like some new age RoboCop. Not interested, but I gave it a chance, watched it. It is a new age RoboCop, but it's pretty good. So
okay,
check it out.
I love RoboCop, so that's probably gonna be a good leeway for me to get into that movie. Well, and since you just listed two of them, I'll just list two Bing Bang animated movies: Incredibles 2 and Isle of Dogs. And mostly because Incredibles 2, it's still great to look at, but yeah, it's predictable. Some of it doesn't work. But what's fun about it is unbelievably fun, and what's entertaining about it is really entertaining. Isle of Dogs is on here, well, same strength but different reasons. It's creative, it is funny once in a while, and it's also just amazing to look at. A couple of the characters, like the lead dog, I didn't think was very compelling. There were also a couple of other bits that I felt were just there to be there and quirky and whatever. But then again, that's his style. But yeah, still great for a watch. Great to have it come out this year, and hopefully it gets like some form of award recognition as opposed to Pixar and Disney, where it's just here's the nominations like candy. Any more?
Yes. So let's see. There's Hotel Artemis and Sorry to Bother You. Both movies that did not reach their full potential, either by doing too much or too little, but still end up with a lot of merits of their own and are thoroughly entertaining and some of the most unique and interesting movies I saw this year. So regardless of their problems, they are well worth watching. So I'd say give them a fair shake.
Yeah, and well, I'm actually surprised that you put Sorry to Bother You on your honorable mentions, but then again, you probably just saw better movies aside from the best comedy movie of the year. But I still liked Hotel Artemis enough. I wouldn't say that it's enough to put on an honorable mention, but it's still good, and I still thought it was underrated at least. But if it would have done more, it would be like an all-time classic. But for what, excuse me, for what it is, I still thought it was enough to be at least entertaining and enjoyable. I can't think of any others at this point in time. Oh yeah, whatever Marvel movies you can think of that came out this year. I only saw I only saw 2 of them. Black Panther. It was all right. It was decent. I don't want to see it ever again.
Did you pay attention to anything I said in the previous video?
What that being?
You didn't, did you? That's okay. Whatever. We'll just move on.
What?
The Disney Overlord, the movies that are coming off the assembly lines, the takeover of the Marvel universe and all that shit.
Black Panther was okay. I'm actively not seeing any of the Avengers movies. Black Panther was okay. Ant-Man and the Wasp was better. And it wasn't even related to the Avengers movies. It only drew reference back to Civil War. But Ant-Man and the Wasp was at least fun. It was fun, and it was basically a stupid fun game of keep away with a lab. And it's Paul Rudd. I love Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd's a boy. He is a boy. He's a good boy indeed.
The best Marvel-related thing I saw this year was the 3rd season of Daredevil, which
they're canceling.
Which they canceled. So, of course they had. It was too good for them, wasn't it?
No.
And, okay, so I have 2 other honorable mentions. We got A Quiet Place, which I was actually surprised at the amount of backlash this movie got for its positive reception. Some people even straight up calling it a farce. I will admit, there were a number of problems that I completely glanced over my first time.
Oh, okay.
But I still think it's pretty good.
It's captivating.
It's a lot closer to the horror movies I would much rather want to see. And last is Hilda. Not a movie, but a cartoon series. And a Netflix exclusive. Why is it on this list? Because it was one of the best things I saw this year. And it's charming as hell. It's delightful. But not enough people know it exists, damn it. So if you have a Netflix subscription, please, you owe it to yourself. Give it a watch, please.
Okay. Whiny man. Alright, no more bullshitting. We're getting down to the most positive things we can fucking come up with this year. And my number 1 choice is from Marvel. It's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Yes, this was my number 1. For a handful of reasons. 1, I saw it right after I saw The Mule, which I needed something to up my goddamn spirits after that movie. But what is so great about this movie is that it doesn't feel like any other Marvel movie I've seen before this. But luckily, it's from it's from Sony Marvel or whatever. It's animated Marvel, which for this is the absolute best choice you can make. And it's from the production team of Phil Lord and Chris Miller, which I already adore their work from the Jump Street movies as well as the first Lego movie. And also, this is probably one of the only movies where you can feel like you're actually in a comic book because they have animation to it. But luckily with the animation, it actually does feel like comic book animation, and the artwork is actually unique and different. And it's not necessarily the CG animation that you're used to. It's not like The Incredibles. It's not like any other form of Pixar movie. It is unique with how they move and how everything happens and takes place in this. And it also offers for the fourth wall breakability of going into parallel universes and multiple universes. Did you see this? You saw the trailer and how, like, the idea of there's other Spider-Mans out there. There's
I'm well aware of that, yeah.
Well, yeah, there's other Spider people, as I'm supposed to call them now, because only 3 of the 6 people are actual Spider-Men. Because you've got Miles Morales, who is this young black kid from New York, and he's about to go off into his own origin story. But there is a Peter Parker that already exists, and he dies. But he's also bitten by the radioactive spider, and yeah, he gets the powers. He goes through a way better origin and way better actual explanation of his powers than fucking Spider-Man Homecoming was. Again, fuck that movie. Way fucking better than Homecoming, because the lead isn't a sniveling bitch to anybody that he's around.
That's good.
And he also has another version of Peter Parker as his mentor, and the actual Peter Parker is actually funny. He's not and he's not even necessarily the wimp because he's an adult, but he's actually funny because he's sarcastic. He's got a bit of a gut, which everyone makes fun of because, oh yeah, your breakup with, the other lead at that time, he lives on his own and just eats pizza and is depressed all day. But they also have Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman, I guess. They have
Spider-Girl.
They have Penny Parker from an anime series. They have Nicolas Cage is back. Nicolas Cage voices Spider-Man Noir. He's all black and white. He talks about like the old-timey stuff. He's got a fedora hat. And them acting as a unit is way more funny than anything the Avengers has done and anything other comedy like group stuff Marvel has done, because they actually do put effort into the explanation of these characters, the backstory of these characters, and actually does use it in a narrative sense, in a flowing, funny narrative sense. The story for this is again very simple, just the parallel dimension. Just insert any Spider-Man origin story, but a likable kid. He's not annoying at all. Once in a while, he'll try and be like, oh yeah, I'm cool, but then he realizes he's a bit awkward. But that's the only thing. Little. They don't try and force anything on you in this. They don't try and force any comedy down your throats. It comes naturally. And especially with Lord Miller, who are very visually comedic people, they know how to take advantage of, one of the more funny Marvel superheroes, or one of the better intently comedic superheroes of Marvel lore. And they do give him a new origin. They do give him new motivations, new traits, and it feels fully flowing. You don't feel like you ever are just taking a quick jaunder into nowhere. This flows very well. I even had to take a shit during the middle of this movie, and luckily I didn't miss that much. Well, I did miss details, but I didn't miss the tone or the feel of the movie. And that's something that's very consistent. The learning of the lessons is actually very believable as well. The relationships are very good. Again, it's actually funny, and even though it does go for a handful of fourth wall jokes, it isn't as painful or bad as that might sound on like a first experience basis. But again, the animation is fantastic. The art direction and the direction itself is great, as well as the execution. This was the biggest surprise of the year for me, and that is why it is my number one.
Okay.
Especially coming off of Spider-Man Homecoming. Fuck that movie. I want to buy this movie when it finally comes out.
Okay. Well, my number one choice for the year, You Were Never Really Here. Which may sound like, this is probably a weird title, but it's easy to understand if you just apply it to what fixers usually say to their clients or potential survivors. Hey, I was never here. This movie was sold to me on the basis that it was some kind of new age taxi driver, and by the time I was finished watching it, yeah, I see a lot of similarities to that, but the main character reminds me a lot more of Mike from Breaking Bad. And character is kind of the key word here. This movie features, the best main character I've seen all year by a country mile. Joe is a guy who is haunted by his past, who is currently taken up a job as a fixer / gun for hire, who specializes in hunting down human trafficking rings and rescuing the little girls that they've kidnapped. His heart may be golden, but his methods are brutal. He doesn't just rescue the little girls, he brutalizes the fuckers that kidnapped him, beating them to death with a roofing hammer. The performance by Joaquin Phoenix is truly incredible. I mean, I would say he deserves an Oscar, but that all but guarantees he's not going to get it. He may get a nomination, but I'd be very surprised if they gave it to him. you know, this may be really short. I may not be explaining a whole lot, but I really don't want to give away too much about this movie. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. It's the fun part of this movie is experiencing it for yourself the first time. So let me just leave this off by saying that while every movie I just mentioned on my list all may have been striving for different things, they all kind of accomplish something similar, and that's restoring that feeling that I don't get very often anymore. It's becoming more and more rare with the industrialization of the movies from these corporate, lifeless corporations, and that's the feeling of truly being invested in the worlds you've built, the characters you've created, the stories that you tell. These movies are not just mind-numbing entertainments. They are emotional experiences. And that's not to say that they're not fun, because they are, but it's just the important thing is they don't skimp out on making themselves as memorable as possible while also being fun. The excuse you hear all the time is, oh, you just gotta turn your brain off, don't think about it too hard and stuff. Why can't you be both? Why can't you be both a fun movie and an intelligent movie?
Something that's insightful.
Yeah, something that's memorable, something that makes you feel something. It reminds you that you're human, that you have a brain that can be put to use and a heart that can be tugged at every now and again. That's what these movies are. And You Were Never Really Here is at the top of my list because it is the most emotionally powerful movie I saw this year. But any one of the movies I just mentioned do deserve your time as well. Because it pains me. It really does pain me to see a lot of these movies just be buried beneath the waves of the movies that are just popping off the assembly line.
Which a lot of them are mine.
Yeah. I do believe wholeheartedly that these movies are good. And I think more people would think that they're good as well. They just got to know that they even exist, and they got to give them a chance.
So these movies are the best bet for our future as audience members to be able to look into something that is creatively intriguing as well as thought-provoking, urbane, witty, effervescence.
Sure.
But we got to look for that in the new year.
Right.
Which, luckily, so those are what we thought was the best of last year, and thank fucking God, we're done with this year! Yeah! Let's hope for better things. Like we always do.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in.